Hello, welcome back to 5225, 52 Weeks of Loving Movies. Today we're going to talk about week 5, which was films that I thought should have won Best Picture. Now, there are a lot of movies that could have qualified for this, and as I've mentioned before, didn't have a whole lot of time, so I only got to 3 movies, but there were a bunch that could have happened. One we talked about last week, which was There Will Be Blood, from 2007, was the movie that I thought should have won Best Picture. But we talked about it last time because we were talking about Paul Thomas Anderson's second and fifth movies. If you haven't seen that, please go watch it because I talked about some really good films. But this week, while going through trying to figure out which ones I wanted to watch, and normally I try to watch at least one movie that I've never seen, but that was difficult for this one because it was because I couldn't have known the movie should have won Best Picture if I haven't seen it. So I kind of went back and looked at ones that I tried to look at ones where I didn't really like the Best Picture winner, but number one, that's not extremely common for me, and because generally I at least kind of like it at least. The worst Best Picture winner that I've seen ever is Broadway Melody, which was the second ever movie to win Best Picture. But I hadn't seen any of the movies there, and I thought, well, maybe I can watch one because I will definitely like whatever I watch better than the one that than that one. But I decided not to go that route. And so I went with ones that were two of them that were very personal for me, that I thought should have won, and then one that actually has I have a very interesting history with. So let me just say before I go on that the movies that won Best Picture for all of them I think are great films. Yes, that includes one of them that you're going to maybe disagree with me when I talk about it here at the end. But I think they're all great films. And me saying that these other ones should have won isn't necessarily taking away from those films. I do have problems with some of them, with two of them specifically, at least, for similar reasons. But I think technically they are great films. So as I go through these, just keep that in mind. I mean, I'll kind of address them when I talk about them. Also, this video may be a little bit shorter than we're used to, just because it's kind of a busy time here at the Matt Cave. Without any further ado, I'm just going to jump right in and talk about the first movie that I watched for this theme this week, which was Fiddler on the Roof from 1971, which lost to The French Connection. Now, as I mentioned, French Connection's a great film. Technically, it's really great, and I understand why it is held in such high regard, why people love it, why I even understand why it won Best Picture. I think that it has lost something, at least for me, viewing it through modern eyes. Now, I wasn't around, but I wasn't alive in 1971, so I obviously didn't see it back then. But I gave it a full try, or a full watch through in the last couple years. I'm pretty sure I'd seen the whole movie. Before that, I used to work in a video store, so sometimes it's hard to remember just which things I took home and watched each night. I know I had at least seen most of it, parts of it, probably all of it before that. And it was obviously technically great, but it didn't really leave much of an impression on me back then. So I gave it another shot. While I won't say that it glorifies police overreach or anything like that, I will say it doesn't do enough to denounce police overreach and stuff like that. So that actually makes it a little bit harder for me to enjoy. I think it's a good movie. I think it does have some unresolved racism within it, and some unresolved police stuff going on in it that I think a better film, even in 1971, should have addressed. So that's kind of where I come with that. But I'm not here to talk about The French Connection. I'm here to talk about Fiddler on the Roof. This was a movie when I was growing up, and if you watched any of my stuff, you've probably heard me talk about how I grew up and what my childhood was like. But if you haven't, I'll just tell you, we were very poor. We didn't have cable. Really, our main source of entertainment was renting movies sometimes, but really a lot of the movies that we watched, we checked out from the library. And this was one that we checked out from the library the first time I watched it. We later purchased it because there was a thing back then, and it may still be around. I can't imagine it works the same way or is still a thing, but it might be called Columbia House. They did CDs, they did movies. They basically what you would agree to pay to buy a certain number of movies at full price. Usually it was just one. Like you agree to pay to buy 1 or 3 movies at full price at some point, and you get 10 movies for free, or 10 movies for 1 cent each, or something like that. Like it was a really cool racket, and you could generally hold them off for a long time if you're poor, without having to buy the things. They would send you a video, a new tape every month, unless you like sent back this little card that said, I don't want the new tape this month. And if they sent it to you, you had a certain amount of time to send it back, or it was yours to keep and you had to pay for it. Full price too. And VHSs were pretty expensive back then, at least for my economic standing. So we had a large collection of VHS tapes from Columbia House, from, different, signing up under different names and whatnot. We were poor and my mom was doing her best. Okay. No judgment. In fact, it should be celebrated. The little guy getting it over on the big corporations. However, anyway, I digress. Fiddler on the Roof was one of them, and Fiddler on the Roof videotape was a 2-tape set. It came in a big box like that thick because it had 2 videotapes in it. Because the movie was so long, it's a 3-hour movie, and that was pretty uncommon back then. It's become more common now, but it was fairly uncommon back then. We had Fiddler on the Roof, and I used to watch it quite frequently, because really all we had to watch was the movies we had in our home. And so I would watch it pretty often. But then I went through a long period where I just didn't watch it, for whatever reason, just moving on to other things. And then was a teenager, and then I was whatever. And then I got a job at Hollywood Video Store. Rest in peace. But while I worked there, my friend who also really liked that movie, Josh, we would put that movie on throughout the day and just kind of listen to it as we were going. And so I have a lot of really fond memories with this movie. I will say that I've loved it from the beginning. I think it's one of the greatest movie musicals ever made. I had forgotten about this because I recently made a list that I don't think comes up on the all-time top 5 show, although a similar one does. I had recently made a top 10 list of my top 10 favorite fourth wall movies where the character breaks the fourth wall, and I woefully left this one off the list because I had kind of forgotten that Reptevia talks to the camera through most of the movie, and you kind of, he some of his musical numbers are directly to the audience. I had forgot about that, but this would definitely rank very high, maybe number 1, I don't know, maybe number 2 on my fourth wall breaking films, because I absolutely adore that character. That character is very, very interesting, and the thing that makes this movie and the stage play very engaging. Topal plays Reptevia in this movie, taking over for Zero Mustel from the stage play, and I had read a while back that was actually somewhat controversial at the time because that was Mustel's role, and he had originated it, and he was so much connected to that character that when you saw him, that's kind of the character that you thought about. Now, I've seen him in a bunch of other stuff, and so for me, he's not Reptevia, because Reptevia will be Topal to me forever. And I think that was a was a good choice. Actually, Norman Jewison, who directed this, he had explained why he cast Topol instead of Zero Mostel, because and if I'm pronouncing these wrong, you're just gonna have to forgive me. Because mostly I've just read them. But he said that he didn't cast Zero Mostel because his character, though his performance is so large and so big and larger than life, that when you see him on stage, it makes a lot of sense, because he is playing the character to the cheap seats. That's what he's supposed to be doing. He's playing it to the very back of the theater. But if you put that kind of performance on screen, Reptevia becomes Zero Mostel, not Reptevia. And so so he went with Topol, which again I think is a great choice, because Topol absolutely nails this character, nails the performance, everything about it. The character of Reptevia is so interesting, and it's one that I think a lot of people relate to. I think it's why this film and the stage play is so enduring, and why it's stuck around for so long, and so many generations of people are connecting to it, because this is a guy struggling with the world changing. And it's set in 1905, but even at that point, like the world is changing for him and his people. And just in general, the world is changing. It's becoming more advanced. People are having more autonomy. Like it's becoming a thing that is straying away from tradition. And so he is a person who is trying to live in a world that is changing, while also trying to honor the traditions of his people. That's what the title Fiddler on the Roof means. I mean, he says it in the movie, but watching a Jewish person trying to go through life keeping their traditions is like a fiddler on the roof who is just trying to make beautiful music without breaking their neck. And that's kind of how he feels, and that is what you see in this movie. He is constantly trying to keep the traditions that he respects and reveres alive, while also navigating things like his daughters wanting to choose their own mates. Goes through each one of them with them choosing their mates, and each time he is either able to overcome his feelings on it, and the tradition that the traditions that he is eschewing by allowing this, or to put his foot down and say, no, if you're going to do this, you can't be in my life. And that is the decision that he makes each time, between one or the other. And watching him navigate this is very similar to, I think, a lot of people who, especially people from my generation, the generations ahead of me, as we're watching the world change and kind of, and I'm sure the new generations feel the same way. I can't really speak to that. I could speak to, as someone who grew up kind of in the Gen X world, kind of was always treated like a Gen X. Although I am an elder millennial, I'm a cusp millennial. I was always treated as Gen X. And I grew up in this Gen X world. And then as the world is changing, we're kind of realizing that maybe that the way that we were taught the world is, and the way that we were taught to navigate the world, isn't necessarily the right way. And so we are coming up to these points in our lives and in history where we have to kind of make the choice. Do we stick with the status quo and what we've always been taught and what we have found to be the right way, or do we go the new way that we now know is the right way? And as me, who grew up very conservative Christian, I had two different crossroads in that similar way. Number one, when I kind of had to navigate being a conservative, being a Republican in an unjust world that I felt that the Republicans were not addressing properly, which turned me into a Democrat, and even more than that, a very liberal person on the left. And then growing up as a Christian, as I'm going through this world and realizing that there are people who are being marginalized by the this religion of love that, or it should be a religion of love, who are being treated as though they are not loved, and that kind of having to navigate through that, like the traditions versus the way the world is changing. It's something I think that a lot of people can relate to, and something that I very much related to the point where now I'm no longer a Christian. But that doesn't, neither of those things mean that you can't be those things and navigate in this world in an ethical and proper way. You just have to be able to figure out how to navigate it, and how to navigate it in a way that is better for the world than the way the traditions would generally have you do. If you follow the traditions and it's and you're keeping the war and you're making the world a worse place, I have no respect for that. That is something I can't abide. But if you try to keep your traditions while also making allowances for how the world is adapting, or adapting to how the world is changing, and how the things that we have discovered through our time in this world, I think that those people can very much relate to Reb Tevye and what he's going through in here, and come out with a very positive outlook on that. Because, and I'm going to kind of get into spoilers on all of these. If you haven't seen them, I highly recommend you watch them and maybe skip past certain parts of this, or mute it, or go watch them and come back and watch these, because I highly recommend all three of these. So I hope you have seen them. But when you get to the third daughter with Reb Tevye, he can't accept it, because while the first two were outside of the tradition, they were still marrying Jewish people, and people that their daughters loved, which was part of the problem, is that love wasn't meant to be part of it in his tradition. Like, it's not a marriage was not a romantic notion, more of an economic notion, or a societal notion. And so the fact that he's having to navigate these things, but he accepts them because they are they do make his daughters happy, and they are Jewish. When he gets to his third daughter, his youngest daughter, who wants to marry a Gentile, and who does marry a Gentile, it's something he can't abide. He cuts her out. He excommunicates her from the family, which is very, very difficult to see. And I think the film is very clear on that. That is not the right answer, but you understand it because of what the journey you've seen Reb Tevye go throughout the movie and throughout the stage play. And when you get to that final that final scene, that final moment where he still hasn't fully embraced it, and he is not talking to his daughter, even though he wants to. You can see that he absolutely wants to be there for his daughter. He wants to love his daughter. He wants her to be part of his life. His traditions are keeping him from that, until the moment that Golda, his wife, says to his daughter, God be with you. And at that moment, Reb Tevye shouts, God be with you, to them, which is a wonderful moment, because it is a moment of change for him. It is a moment where he eschews that tradition in order to send a greeting, no matter how stilted or kind of transactional it is, to his daughter who he loves. It's a really beautiful moment. It's and you can see the progression in this, to the point where she gets to be part of his life. I mean, and at the end of that, they are moving to America. So I think that American traditions and American customs are probably going to have a lot to say about how he feels going forward, as environmental traditions and cultures do have a lot to do with how you feel about things, and how the choices you make in your life. I think that if this movie continued on, you would see how his life changes, and how he becomes more accepting of that kind of stuff, and to the point where I believe he would accept her back into the family, into their lives, as you would expect, because I think that that is the type of person Rep Tevye is. You see that throughout the film. This actually, even though it is within his tradition, his treatment of his youngest daughter does feel out of character for him, because you've seen him make allowances and you've seen him do these things. So if you haven't seen Fiddle on the Roof, please go watch it. It's 3 hours, but it's wonderful. It's beautiful. The songs are amazing. The performances are really great. It breezes by. It is absolutely worth your time. And it's one of the greatest films ever made. I am going to move on to the next movie, which is 1996's Fargo, which lost Best Picture to The English Patient. Now, I will say, a little caveat here. There are two movies that I really wish would have won Best Picture that year that I love a lot. It's Fargo, and the other one is Jerry Maguire. Jerry Maguire is more of a comfort film for me. There was a time when anytime it was on TV, no matter what point it was, I would just stop and watch it and watch the rest of the movie. It's a movie that I really love, and it's one that I find really comforting. However, I think Fargo is the better film. So I do think that is the one that should have won Best Picture. So that's the one that I am covering here. It did beat it. As I said, it did lose to The English Patient, which again, I think is a great film. I have not seen that in probably 20 years, maybe more. So I can't speak specifically to how I feel today or how I would feel today about it. I can just say that from my memory of it, Fargo was the superior film, in my opinion, should have won Best Picture. Fargo was made by the Coen brothers, written and directed by the Coen brothers, directed by Joel Coen. I'm a huge fan of the Coen brothers. There's only, I think, 2 movies of theirs that I don't love. Only one of those that I just don't really like, and that's Lady Killers, which is a remake. It's not even an original by them. So Lady Killers is just, and I should probably revisit it. I'm sure that's one that I should revisit and see how I feel today, because back then I just did not enjoy it. But other than that, like, I'm a big fan of theirs, so most of those movies are gonna work for me anyway. I remember in 1996 or 1997, whenever this came out on home video, we were over at my grandma's house and my uncles were there, and we were all sitting around and we decided we were going to watch Fargo. And my grandma, who had a little office, it was just a couple steps down outside of the living room. It would step down into a little den that she made an office in. Was just not going to enjoy this movie. She doesn't like movies that have a lot of curse words. She doesn't like violent movies. Like, this was never going to work for her. So, and she had a trademark sound that she made whenever she heard something she disliked in films, and that was, she would go. So we start this movie, and she can hear it from her little office because it's right the next door. We start this movie, we're watching it. We just hear is that the only word they know? Stuff like that as we're watching this movie. But as we're watching it, we stop hearing the at some point, and someone noticed. I think my Uncle Mike noticed and looks over toward where my grandma's in, and she's at the top of the little steps, sitting on the floor, kind of leaning over, watching the film, which was great, which is a really funny moment in our family's history. But for me, this film, it is one that I've seen many, many times. It's one that I constantly go back to, because the script is so good. The screenplay for this movie is so good. It's so well paced. It's so well acted and edited. Frances McDormand is my favorite actor. If you don't know that, now you do. She's my favorite actor. This is probably her favorite role that I've ever seen her do. My late sister and I used to do her accent a lot. It was really just like that northern Midwest American accent that we would do. But we used to do I think I'm gonna barf, or oh, you betcha, that kind of stuff. We would always do that, and it'd always make each other laugh, and that was one of our favorite little ways to communicate was through our Fargo voices. But this movie is kind of the perfect amalgamation of everything that the Coen brothers did or do, because their filmography kind of ranges, because you've got their gritty ultraviolet type films like No Country for Old Men, which should have lost to There Will Be Blood. Even though I love No Country for Old Men because I love the Coen brothers and I absolutely love that movie. It just whatever. I've already talked about this. But they've got those, but then they've got their funny kind of absurd comedies, You're Raising Arizonas and stuff like that. This one feels like the perfect hybrid because it's funny, it's comedy, and it's very, very funny, but it's also got that violence and that crime aspect of it. There's just so much of this. This feels like the perfect Coen movie, and you can't watch this without going, yes, this is absolutely Coen's. I think it's been imitated so many times since then that watching it now may not feel as original as it felt back then, but it was absolutely a milestone in my film journey. It is a moment that I'll never forget, first seeing this movie and just absolutely falling in love with it. I don't have a whole lot to say about this because the movie speaks for itself, and I've talked about it so much over the years that I don't feel like I have anything new to say about this movie. So I'm probably going to move on here, but I just want to say, if you've never seen Fargo, absolutely go watch it and enjoy the performances, enjoy the accents, enjoy the writing, the pacing, the cinematography. It's Roger Deakins, greatest cinematographer of all time, in my opinion. Roger Deakins, you should go watch it. Don't you know? Is it one of the greatest movies of all time? Oh, you betcha. Which brings us to Brokeback Mountain from 2005, which lost to Crash. Now, this is the one that when I said at the top, I think all of these movies are great. That's because I think Crash is a great film. I spent 15 years defending Crash as the best movie of 2005. 15 full years. People would talk about it, and the talk wasn't immediate. People like to yes, it was a surprise in some respects because of the way that the award season had gone. It wasn't a surprise in that people didn't think that it was going to win Best Picture or didn't think it was capable of winning Best Picture, because it was on a lot of top 10 lists. It was on, there was a lot of talk about it during that time. It had built momentum in the culture during that time. I talked to Dylan about this a lot. My friend Dylan, and co-host on my show Frame Wreck over on the Dill Pickle Movie Network. He's the founder of Dill Pickle Movie Network. I talk to him about this all the time because he is from a different generation of Oscar prognostication than I am. See, I come from a world where we didn't really have all the stats on the internet. The internet was in its infancy back when I was doing this, and we didn't have all of the information. We had some, and usually you'd read that in books or see it on in documentaries or see it on the news. If someone was talking about it, you didn't really have just all of this information at your fingertips. So back then, we'd watch the precursors. We'd at least usually read in the trades about who won what, or in the magazines and on the internet. Once the internet was more readily available, you'd read about who won, the award, precursor awards. But it wasn't that, and that was an indicator, and it still is. But there was more to it than that. There was more to it. There was the thing about watching the movies, and your own personal opinion had something to do with your prognostication on these type of things. And there's something about the vibe and the culture of the time that also helped in determining this type of stuff. Now, that's not to say that the ways that they do it today is wrong or bad or anything, because I think it's great. I think that people who are able to do it, who are able to keep the stats and look at everything like that, that's great. That's just not the way I did it, and it's less fun for me, because for me there's a lot of subjectivity and a lot of emotion that goes into how I like to do it. And listen, from 2002 or the 2003 Oscar ceremony for the 2002 movies until Green Book won in 2018 or the 2019 ceremony, I had never been wrong about my Best Picture pick. I was wrong in for 2002 because I was young and naive, and I thought that the Two Towers was going to win. That's dumb. It wasn't. They were definitely going to wait until the next year and give it to the Return of the King. To me, that was the best movie, and I can't everybody see that it's the best movie. And I wasn't a big fan of Chicago, which, by the way, I could have done a video on the Two Towers, but there's going to be a video later in the series that covers the Two Towers and all three Lord of the Rings movies. But so from during that time, I was never wrong about Best Picture. It kind of takes a little bit of a weight off you now. Like, I was devastated at the time, but now it's like, okay, I no longer have this thing to maintain, so I can have a lot of fun. I'm probably still gonna pick the one that I think is going to win, but I also might predict The Substance, which is the one I want to win, just to on the off chance that I happen to be right. Corley Farge comes in with a steel chair and takes the Oscar. No, the way that it's done today is right, and it's good. There's just a way that I used to do it that was more fun and I enjoy. So anyway, that brings me back to Crash and Brokeback Mountain. Listen, when Crash came out, I know we look at it today and say, it's solved racism, or calls it a racist movie, because it was made by white people. It was also made by black people. I mean, everybody in this is a filmmaker, but it was the creative team was white people, and I understand that argument today with 2025 eyes and ears. I understand that argument. I will say that in 2005, no matter how we feel about it today, it was saying something that we needed to hear back then, even if that seems so pathetic and small compared to what we should have been hearing. It's something we needed to hear back then, especially me. I'm from a small town in Oklahoma, so hearing it, which is predominantly white and Latino, so hearing the perspectives from the black people in this movie, or the Middle Eastern people in this movie, I say this movie, I mean Crash. It was something that we didn't. It was a side we didn't get a lot. Now, was it 100% correct? No, I mean that because it wasn't coming from someone who'd lived the experience of that, but it was coming from someone who was, I believe, trying to be noble. This was not done cynically. I think, in my opinion, this movie was not made cynically. It was made by someone who felt like they needed to say something about race and about how their culture deals with it. And so for that, I think that it's a good movie. It's a great movie. I think it's well made. I think it gets a bad rap because of the backlash from it, and I think that people throw it out wholesale. And listen, there's probably some people who legitimately think it's a bad movie. I don't think that everybody that thinks that that says it's a bad movie thinks it's a terrible movie. I think that it is all about the conversation and what it represents to them. So I'm going to be done talking about Crash now. I'm going to talk about Brokeback Mountain, which is the movie that did not win. And again, I said for 15 years, I was staunchly opposed to the idea that this movie should have won because I thought that the best movie did win. Until I rewatched both of them back to back a few years ago for a movie club that I was a part of. And I truly saw what everybody's been talking about. And again, this was from 2021 eyes, I think is what it was. I think that was when I watched it. Seeing it that way is a different context to what to how I saw it before. It is a different the culture that I'm watching it in is completely different than the one in 2005. So my feelings on it back then were correct, and I think my feelings on it now are correct. I will say, I know that there's a lot of people when it comes to Best Picture who, uh, when they look back at Best Picture, go, well, that movie didn't endure the way that it should have, or that movie, if we look back, I bet they would have changed it or whatever. And there's some people I've heard the argument that like we should do Best Picture 5 years after the movie comes out, and I say no, because that's just going to be about popularity if you do it that way. That's not going to be a snapshot of what the world thought was, or what the industry thought was the best film, or largely the industry thought was the best film. It's not a because the Best Picture should be a reflection of the world that it is. It should be a product of the world it is made in, and the award should be a product of the world that it is awarded in. I think for that, that's why I think that's why I think this happened. Yes, it was a very homophobic time. And I think that today, absolutely, even without like the change in kind of how we see race and stuff like that, I think that Brokeback Mountain would absolutely win, because I think that our culture has changed. Like Fiddler on the Roof, we kind of struggled between the tradition, how we had always seen the world and how the world was changing. And I think that for the most part, we've changed for the better. There's a lot of stuff that's going wrong, particularly in politics, and particularly in the way that, Crash didn't fix a lot of things that it was talking about. Those issues are still there. There's still a lot of homophobia. I just think that we live in a world where it is less prevalent than it was back then. Because I think that Brokeback Mountain still holds a stigma, even to the more enlightened. Even though we're in a more enlightened society, people still think back to a time when they were less enlightened, and still have that thought about this movie in their mind. So, Brokeback Mountain, directed by Ang Lee, stars Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal, who both give fantastic performances. I stand by that. That I think that Philip Seymour Hoffman should have won Best Actor that year, and he did. That was the best, but I think that Heath Ledger absolutely deserved that nomination, and I would not have been sad to see him win, because he is really great in this. And what's great is that like there's a restraint in the performance he gives, and it's so restrained that you can see the conflict boiling behind his performance. He does a few times, but he mostly doesn't go above about a 3 in this movie. But you can always see in his performance that there is like a 10 boiling behind his eyes. And I think that's incredible. I think that his performance is really, really, really spectacular, and definitely deserved the nomination that it got, and deserves all the accolades that he's ever received for this, and for most of his performance. I think he's a great actor. He's one of my favorites. When I was revisiting this time, because I've seen it several times since then, it's not like I was revisiting for the first time in 20 years or whatever. When I revisited this time, I kind of considered today, and how we look at things today, and how we looked at things back then, and stuff like that. I think that the fact that it's so progressive, it was so progressive for the time, yet today we look at it as this very, very safe gay film. One of my internet friends, they said that, it's every straight man's favorite gay movie, and I get where they're coming from, because they were saying, like, this is such a safe movie that straight people, that it does unoffensive to straight people. And I think today that's true for people who were seeing it for the first time. That was not true back then. Because as I said, I think a lot of people it still holds a stigma for what it was like back then to see it. But watching it, realizing, wow, this is something that was very revolutionary for the time. I worked at the video store when it came out. Basically, everybody who came in called it the gay cowboy movie. They still probably call it the gay cowboy movie, and it is a gay cowboy movie, but not in the pejorative sense that they meant. It's just a really beautiful love story. Oh, here's another criticism I used to hear all the time, especially from conservatives, back when it came out. If these were two straight people, This would just be a regular love story. It wouldn't be worth noting at all. Well, yeah, but if it was two straight people, they would have just been together. Like they wouldn't have had to go through the hardship. That's the point. Like when people are so close to the point, and just refuse to look at it. Yeah, the point is that they would never have been able to, like, if it was two straight people, you wouldn't have this story. When I look at it that way, I think it is part of the reason that the culture changed, because while I kind of pushed back on the every straight man's favorite gay movie, I think that when Wynn said that, I was thinking too much about what it was like in 2005 and not thinking about the way that this movie probably helped change our world and our culture. Help, in the same way that again, Reb Tevia's daughters helped him change the way that he viewed his culture. So I think that although I did push back with Wynn, I think that they did have a very good point about it. Even though I think that every straight man's favorite gay movie is Fight Club. But yeah, so again, this is one that's been talked to death, and I've been on here a long time. I said this was going to be a short episode, but man, is it not? It's actually one of my longer for this series. So so I think I'm going to leave it right here because, again, I do have stuff to do. I really hope, if you've never seen any of these three movies, please watch them, and watch them through today's eyes and through the eyes of the people who would have been watching it back then. See if you can kind of see where I'm coming from with these films. This next week, week 6. Week 6 is going to be movies with Oscar-winning performances in them. Now, this is one where I will get a chance to watch some that I haven't seen before, and some of my old favorite performances. Maybe some that I think maybe shouldn't have won. Who knows? Well, we're going to find out. Tell me in the comments, have you seen these movies and how did you feel about them? How do you feel about them today versus what you think it was like when they came out, if you weren't around back then? Or what was it like when they came out if you were around before them? Are there any other movies that you think should have won Best Picture but didn't? That was nominated but did not win? And what are some of your favorite Oscar-winning acting performances? Talk to me in the comments. Bye.